Lacey. Thank you so much for joining me. If you haven't been here before and if you watch my videos, I thank you so much as always. Today we're creating this gorgeous maxi dress out of thrifted items. It takes 4 dresses, and when I start the video I say 3, but you'll see later on in the video I had to add another one. But we've got patchwork and tassel trim down at the bottom. Now, this is kind of a little mini series. I am going to post a video of a whole outfit eventually, the duster and a gorgeous scarf to go with it. But this is the first piece we're making. The other 2 videos, they take time to edit, so I'll get them up as soon as I can. It may be a little bit, but there will be 2 more items to go with this gorgeous dress. Let's get started. So these are the 3 main pieces that this dress is made out of. It's this animal print and a couple other dresses that have really busy patterns. Now, I don't just float into the thrift store like a Disney character and just swoop things off the racks and be like, this will be beautiful with this, and boy, I'll make a maxi dress. And no, it doesn't work that way. How this happened was, usually when I go to the thrift store, I have a plan and a lot of times a list. But sometimes I see things that I think would just be fun for me to wear whenever, you know. So I found these 2 dresses. And after I laundered them, I threw them on my kitchen table and they were just kind of on top of each other. And I thought, boy, that looks really fun and cute together. And then I started thinking, well, it's fall. Maybe I'll add some length with this dress. There wasn't enough fabric here. So I went back to the thrift store looking for another dress to add that bottom ruffle with. And my cart gets loaded up with items. And sometimes when I'm putting things together, I'll have 10, 12 items in there because I'm just pulling, this might work, this might work, this might work. And then when I think I've got enough to work with, I find a kind of private area in the thrift store and I take a clothing rack and I just swish everything to the side so that I have a bar to work with. And then I just start hanging everything out of my cart onto the rack and get a visual of what it all looks like together, and almost immediately I can eliminate something. It's almost a process of elimination. I start eliminating things. No, that doesn't look that great with that. And I just keep eliminating until I feel I have a beautiful look. And on this one, I know I wanted each piece to have some sort of brown. I wanted it to be a medium color, and black in the patterns was okay. So this is what we're starting with. So if you have a shorter dress and you want to add a ruffle to it, put it on and take a yardstick and just go from the bottom of the dress to the length you want it, and just eyeball it and see how much of fabric you're going to want to add to it. Now, I only have, sometimes you have to let the pieces you're working with dictate. So I want this to be part of a ruffle, and I want it to be kind of like this. This is the dress still intact. But I only have 16 inches right here. So I held my yardstick up and I looked at it. Well, what's 16 inches do to this? Well, I actually had it on and I added that 16 inches, and that brings it to about my ankle. Well, I would have liked it to be a little longer, so then we'll talk about this later, but I'm going to add a couple inches of fringe at the bottom that will give it the length that I want. I could have added another small ruffle or done anything really to add that extra length. So 16 inches is the magic number. We're going to create a full ruffle at the bottom, 16 inches tall. The first thing I want to do, so I have these 2 dresses, is just get them deconstructed and open them up. So I basically just have fabric to work with. And so I'll do the exact same thing to both dresses, but I'll show you on this one. All I'm going to do is cut these sleeves off, and I'm coming on this side of the arm. There's a seam right here, And now I'll be cutting on the arm side of that seam, but for this project, it really does not matter. And then I'll get both those arms cut off, and then I'll find the seam on the side and I'll cut it open. Now this one I have to be a little careful because I only have 16 inches. I don't want to get it all off center. I want to be careful so I don't waste any fabric here because I'll need every bit of this. Okay, so cut the arm off. Now I will cut across the shoulder seam. And when I do that to this side, cut the sleeve off, open it up, cut across the shoulder, I'll have a big piece of fabric to work with. And then I'll do the same thing, deconstruct the other dress as well. Okay, so now I have 4 pieces, the front and back of 2 dresses, and I also have some sleeves. And I'm going to put these aside for now because I'll use those in a little while. And now what I want to do is just go to the bottom, and I'm going to cut these hems off. I just don't want that extra bulk. I want my bottom ruffle to be kind of floaty and romantic, and I don't want any weird bunchy fabric. So I'm just cutting those hems off on all 4 pieces. And now what I want to do, so this animal print is the main dress. I want to measure this very bottom. Now it's all ruffly, so I can't really take my tape measure and measure it like this. So I'm going to have to find a side seam and remember where I started. And I am just going to, there's the side seam, measure all the way around and see what that dimension is, because I'll have to cut my ruffle pieces according to that. So I'll get this measured and I'll come back. Okay, so I got the bottom all measured and I got 130 inches all the way around. Now, I now need to measure how much usable space I have here to go around the ruffle. And I measured all the usable space that would give me the 16 inches tall, and I got 102 inches. Now, the dress was 130, so I need more. So what I did, you know, upcycling is all about improvising. I went to another animal print dress that I had, and I had already used this on another project, pieces of it, and I can't remember, a purse or something. And I had to cut that open because I want my ruffle to be at least 130 inches. It's going to be a little longer because I like to err on the side of caution and go over my measurement rather than under. So this totaled now 162 inches. I won't need all that. I'll show you what I end up using for my ruffle dimension. So now I have 6 panels from my dresses. From 3 different dresses, I have 6 panels to work with. And what I need to do is cut them into 16-inch strips. Now I'll start with this one to show you how I do this. And I'm going to turn it over because I want to mark on the wrong side here. And I am just going to take my yardstick and I'm going to go to that 16 inches, which is about exact right there, and just move it down. That's still exact. Now it gets a little wider, so now I can start marking. I'm just going to mark it those 16 inches. All the way down. Now, if your pattern is like dark or too busy to see like a marker mark, you can use chalk, or sometimes you can just cut as you move your yardstick down. I do that a lot, but on this one, I'm trying to be a little more precise because this one's not as forgiving because I don't have much of this fabric, so I want to be careful I don't mess it up. So, okay. And then I won't need this part. I want a nice rectangle. So I'm just going to cut across under the armpit. This is basically armpit to armpit. And now I have a 16-inch rectangle. And it really doesn't matter what it is this way because they're all going to be different and we're going to piece them together. So I'm going to do this with the other 5 panels and try to get as much fabric as I can out of them and a 16-inch tall rectangle. So now I have my 6 rectangles all cut out and they're all 16 inches tall, but they're all different lengths because all the dresses were different lengths. And so now I want to piece these together to make a super long rectangle. And this is actually how I will take this to my machine. So I'll always take it in like a stack in the order that I want to sew it. But what I will do is I'll push this over here. I'll start with 1. And then on this side, doesn't matter which side really, I will take the next pattern. I want to alternate the patterns. And so I want it to be sewn together, right? So I want this project, I want these right sides together. A lot of times I do wrong sides together because I like to see the seams on the outside, but this one I'm doing a little different. So I will lay it over top, right sides together, and I don't pin these, but you can. I just do this right when I'm sitting at my sewing machine. And I'll line those up. I'll bring the end I'm going to sew closer to you so you can see. So say this is where we want to sew the 2 pieces together. I'll line it up, put it in my machine, put the needle in, do my forward stitch and back stitch to lock that in. I am just going to do a fairly small straight stitch and I'm going to use gold thread on mine. I will just piece that together, sew it all the way down. And then when I get that one sewn, I'll open it up and grab my next piece that I had pre-planned here. And I want it to go right here. So again, what I do is fold it right sides together, stitch the end pieces here all the way down. When I get that done, I'll just keep, then I'm starting over. I only have 3 patterns. I'm starting back with the animal print. So that, this one, and then this one. I'm not worried about right now how long this is. I just want to get these all pieced together. Each seam's going to have a seam allowance and I don't want to figure all that. So I'm just going to piece them together and then I'll measure it, but I'm probably just going to take the whole thing over to my dress. But first I need to get these pieced together. Okay, so now I have it all sewn together and I brought it over to my ironing board just because I want to press those seams flat. And I'm just going to throw a tea towel over top of my seams. I haven't tested all this fabric to see how it responds to an iron, so I'm just taking a precaution here. And I will just get all these seams sewn or pressed. Okay, so I have the seams all pressed and I want to show you this. When you sew your pieces together, start at the top every single time because the bottom is going to do things like this, especially if you have 4 different dresses or 3 different dresses. They all have a different amount of stretch in them, and when you sew it, some of them will kind of come longer to me, that just seems unavoidable unless I'm using like 100% cotton. And I really do not sweat this kind of stuff. What I do is I just take that extra and I just blend it into the rest so that they all line up. See, this will be the same. Now, this had extra stretch. This is really stretchy. And so it came even longer. And I am just going to trim it and blend it in with the rest. And for me, it always turns out just fine. Now I'll get that all trimmed up and come back. Okay, so this is what my bottom piece looks like. And now I want to sew it on to the dress. Now what I want to do is sew that fabric to the bottom of this dress. And I have it right side out because I want to sew right sides together. I don't want this seam to show on this one. I do that with a lot of my stuff, but with this one I'm not. So I am going to take my piece of fabric that we stitched together here, and I am going to lay it. I always start at a side seam, and I am going to lay this, here's the top. I am going to lay it upside down, right sides together, over top the bottom of this dress here. Now I will start sewing at the side seam, but I am not going to start sewing the very end of this there. I am going to come in about 2 inches and start sewing on the side seam because I want to sew this ruffle completely shut when I'm all finished, and I need this extra little flap in order to do it. So I'll go to my machine, I'll lay this over top of that side seam about 2 inches, and I will just start stitching. I will not pin this or anything. I will just sew it straight along the bottom, and I'll use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to use my gold thread and a fairly small straight stitch and sew all the way around until I get to this open flap, and then I'll show you how I piece that together. Okay, so I had a lot extra of the piece we cut out, and I'd much rather have extra than not enough. So I'm back at the side seam where we started, and here's the flap that we didn't sew all the way down. Now I played with this and measured how much I'm going to need to sew onto here to complete this ruffle, and so that was about right here. And I gave myself an extra like 1/2 inch seam allowance to sew it onto here. Now, there are really no exact measurements. I never measure this. I just kind of eyeball it, and hopefully you can too. So now I need to sew this piece and this piece together, but I need to turn it inside out in order to do that. So now I have it inside out. I'm going to take this end of the ruffle and this end of the ruffle and lay it on top of one another here. And I'm going to go to my machine, and I'm just going to do a straight stitch to sew those 2 sides together. I'll get that sewn, and then, whoops, I'll get that sewn, and then I'll come back and show you what I do. Now I have this sewn together, and I'm going to turn my dress right side out again. If I can find an opening, there we go. Okay. Now I'm going to go to where we left off here. Okay, this is where I sewed those 2 pieces together, right down here. Now we still have this. I gotta trim the thread, and it drives me crazy. Okay, so now all that's left to do is we have a hole here that we need to sew yet. And I will turn this back on top of right sides together, and I will go to my machine and I'll have to pleat this a little bit because I eyeballed it not perfectly, but I'll just do a little pleating in there to make that fit. But let's just pretend it's straight across. We'll just go back to where we left off stitching, stitch that hole closed. Okay, now that I have my bottom piece all sewn, I'm just throwing it over the end of my ironing board, and I'm going to lay a tea towel down and press that seam all the way around. Okay, this is what we have so far. I'm obsessed. I love this. You know, one of my favorite designers of all time is Roberto Cavalli. I'm feeling like this is giving me a little bit of Roberto vibe. Sorry, Roberto, but okay. So now I'm going to put it on, and I'm going to see what we got going on with the length. Okay, here's the length. For me, that's absolutely perfect because I want to add some gold tassel trim down at the bottom, and the length is about at my ankles. So if I add that trim, it's not going to be, I was afraid it might be too long, and if I added that trim then I'd be stepping on it, but this is just right. So before I add the tassels on, what I want to do is add some patches here and there on the dress, and I want to do this before I add the tassels because I don't want all those tassels getting in my way and everything, and it's a lot easier to do before I add them. I am loving it so far. Okay, so this might be kind of hard to see because these patterns kind of blend in with one another, which is awesome. So on the front, I'm putting 2 patches. Now, I just want to coordinate the top portion of the dress with this ruffle that we did at the bottom. And so I cut out a rectangle piece of fabric. It's this one right here, and it's 12 by 7. And I put it off center, just about right there, and pinned it down. And then I took this fabric, which is also down here in the ruffle, and I cut a 9 by 9 square, and I just overlapped the corner of that blackish looking one and started pinning it down. And so I'll pin this down really well. And then when I get it all pinned on, I am going to use a zigzag stitch because I just think that makes it look a little more finished. If I use a straight stitch, it might look unfinished, but a zigzag looks intentional and a bit decorative. So I will probably use a brownish thread, and I will just slip this back into my machine and go around, stay pretty close to the edges using a zigzag stitch and get those patches. As I'm pinning here, I thought it would be a good idea to show you my little pinning trick. I stick a piece of cardboard, usually like a priority box, in between these 2 pieces of layers of fabric, the front and the back, so that I don't have to stick my hand up under there and lift it up. And I can just pin super easy right on top of that cardboard. Okay, I'll go get these 2 sewn on. Okay, I'm setting my machine. Zigzag stitches have a length, just like a straight stitch. And I'm setting my zigzag stitch on the widest length. And I am just taking the bottom of my dress and sliding it in. This is so big that I really don't need to remove that front plate to do this. And I'm just going to find a corner of one of my patches and remove the pin, stick my needle in, forward stitch, back stitch, and stay close to the edge, and I'll just, hung up here. Okay, and I'll just go all the way around those two patches. Okay, I'm down here on the floor. So these were the two patches that we talked about right here. This is where that bottom layer started that we sewed on. And then I did the back. Make sure you can see the whole thing here. Yeah, so I did 3 patches on the back. So here's where our bottom ruffle started. And it was a lot of leopard right there. So I wanted to break that up and add a patch down there. Now I wrote down the measurements just in case you were wondering. So this patch down here is 14 by 4.5. And then I did I did the black one first. I did this blackish patch, and that one is 12 by 8. And then I did a rectangle patch right here, and that is 10 by 4. So cute. Now I just want to add the tassel trim to the bottom, and we'll be all done. Okay, so here's the bottom of my dress. And I want to talk about fringe a little bit, fringes and trims. And I know they can be difficult to find. I mean, it's always been a little bit of a challenge for me all these years too. And I've gotten mine on eBay. Sometimes I find them at antique malls, flea markets. If you go to a thrift store, you know, sometimes like a blanket will have fringe all around the edge, or sometimes curtains will have trims and you cut it off or seam rip it off. And I also, Hobby Lobby, believe it or not, will have like a sale bin of fringes and trims. And if I find a really good deal on it, I'll pick it up. Now, I had 4 yards of this from Hobby Lobby, and it's the gold tassel trim. Now, it's typically $9 a yard, and this bolt had 4 yards. It was $31.96. I got it for $7.96. So I got the whole thing for less than what they were asking original price per yard. So I pick up deals like that as well. Okay, so all I'm going to do here is sew this at the very bottom. I want it to cover that raw hemline that we have, and plus decorate it. So this is kind of frayed and raw at the edge. I'm just going to leave that be, and I will finish the end piece when I get back to it, but I'll just start it off with that raw little end, and I will lay it as much on the fabric as I can without being able to see that raw hemline. So I'll lay it on there most of the way, and I won't pin this or anything. I'll just take this to my machine, put the needle through both the trim and the dress, and I'll just kind of eyeball it all the way around to make sure I'm covering that hem and the hem's not sticking below the trim. And I will use a zigzag stitch, and I'll do that all the way around. And then when I get to the end, I'll just show you how I finish it off. Okay, I'm at the end, or back where I started. Now this is where I started, that fringe right here. And here's where I stopped the machine from sewing. And I want to cut, so if I sew right over top of that, I'm going to have a raw edge. So I'm going to cut past that about 1 inch. And then I'm just going to fold it over and lay it on top of the raw edge of my fringe. And just sew right over top of that. Okay, here it is all finished. I'm going to put it on and show you what it looks like on, and then we're gonna style it together. Okay, so here's the dress. How fun. I made a head wrap out of the scraps from this dress, just like a long scarf that I doubled and tied in a knot right here. I have some long black earrings, stack of bracelets. I have these fun tie-up boots that I wear with everything. Got those on Amazon. I'll put a link in my description. This scarf is upcycled, all thrifted materials. So perfect with the dress, right? Some fur, some fringe, some leather. I will have a tutorial for this as soon as I'm done editing it. I will put the link in the description of this video. Another video that's coming up is this duster made out of one dress and just some trims and fringes and applique, things like that. The video for this will be coming up as well. I just need to get them edited, and I'll put the link in the description when they're posted. And I have a tutorial that's already up for this purse. I'm not trying to sell my tutorials, but it's just so fun to see all these little elements of things that I've made come together. This is like a furry purse, leather, fringe, made out of thrifted items. How fun is that? Now, I just want to say quickly, I get quite a few messages from people who tell me they want to upcycle clothes, but they're nervous or they're scared, and I've even heard terrified. But I want to say why. So if you get a few, two or three items from the thrift store, you're not really spending that much. I mean, time is valuable. You know, you invest a little time in creating something, but if it doesn't work out, what's the worst case scenario? Nothing, right? You just spent a little time and a few dollars at the thrift store, but this is supposed to be fun, and I don't take it too seriously. I just love throwing stuff together, and I have there's a funny little joke between my fiance Stu and me when I used to sell on eBay and I did auctions. And, you know, sometimes my pieces would go really, really high. And so I would show him what I made, and he's very conservative. If I came into him and be like, what do you think? He'd be like, I don't know. But we got to a point where he'd say, that's really ugly. It's going to sell like crazy. It's going to sell really high. And I would laugh. So whenever I would show him something and he said he didn't like it, I knew it was going to probably sell high as an auction. So I guess the point to that is just be creative and do what you want. Not everybody is going to like everything you make, everything you create, but as long as you like it and you have fun doing it, that's all that matters. Thank you so, so much for watching.